So the main message from this budget is essentially the shift in funding from the mining boom and the mining tax revenue from business to families. We should also point out that in the budget figures, the mining tax revenue has also fallen a little since the mid-year budget update. It's down almost $1 billion over the next 3 years. The opposition, of course, has argued that the mining tax isn't going to raise as much as the government is already committed to spending from its proceeds. Well, for more in terms of the opposition reaction to this, I'm now joined by the Shadow Treasurer, Joe Hockey. Welcome. What's your overall reaction to this budget?
Well, it's a confused economic message. And if it's about Labor values, then the Labor values are that they don't tell the truth.
Where have they not told the truth?
Well, for a start, Wayne Swan says that he's coming back to surplus on the basis of savings. What he's coming back to surplus on is an increase in revenue of $39 billion in 1 year, $34 billion of tax. Secondly, they're shuffling money between years. Infrastructure spending they've brought forward from July to June, so it's not in the next financial year. That's over $1 billion. The government's also bringing forward payments to families and using underspends to pay for that. If all of that was actually in the following financial year, it would wipe out their so-called surplus immediately.
Well, let me ask you about these family payments, which are the cornerstone of tonight's budget. Will you support them?
The family tax benefit Part A payments we're inclined to support because by that stage the carbon tax will be in place. Allowance changes we're also inclined to support. But the one-off sugar hit, which is claimed to be part of education but is in fact it's all about the carbon tax, we're not going to support.
The school kids bonus you won't support?
It's got nothing to do with school kids. It's everything to do with the carbon tax.
Is your concern about that there's no requirement for parents to spend that on education? There's an assumption they will, but no requirement for them to hand in receipts.
You know, David, and I know, it's got nothing to do with education. It's got everything to do with Julia Gillard's electoral pain. Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan aren't going to be around to see whether they actually end up with a surplus or not. They're going to leave the heavy lifting to someone else, Bill Shorten or Kevin Rudd, or maybe there'll be an election and there'll be a change, who knows. So
you would prefer to revert to the education tax rebate as it was previously structured, where parents had to hand in receipts?
Well, mate, it is another person's money. It is another person's money. A taxpayer's money is someone else's hard-earned money. And if you just write out a cheque to others, it's a gift. And quite frankly, people work damn hard for their money.
All right,
and they should, if you're handing out taxpayers' money, there should be a level of accountability associated.
So you won't support that, but the bigger spending items, when you put them together, are the family tax payment and this supplementary allowance they've announced tonight. You've said here that you're inclined to support those. How are you going to pay for them without the mining tax?
Well, mate, as you said, the mining tax has actually dropped in revenue. The mining tax, which they claim would raise $10.6 billion, is now over 3 years going to raise $9.7 billion. But even then, no one takes it seriously.
Over 4 years, it's now more than 13.
Yeah, but no one's taking the numbers seriously. No one's taking the mining tax numbers seriously, and that's the challenge.
Well, Treasury is.
Well, you watch. You watch.
But still, you're going to have to find the money from somewhere without the mining tax.
Starting point is public service in Canberra is still around 20,000 employees more than what the Labor Party inherited in 2007.
But there is a contradiction here. You opposed the company tax cut because it was linked to the mining tax.
Yeah.
Now you're supporting the family payments, but they're also linked to the mining tax.
Well, no, I don't see how they're linked to the mining tax. They're out of revenue. They're straight out of revenue. They've got nothing to do with the mining tax. It's not hypothecated. There's no legislation to that effect. It's just a revenue payment. So it's government spin.
Couldn't you have said the same about the company tax cuts, though?
Well, no, because they were part of the package that the Labor Party presented to the electorate.
But they were separate pieces of legislation.
But they were part of a package the Labor Party showed to the electorate and went to the election on. And the interesting thing is, they say the mining tax has delivered this great windfall dividend. But the interesting thing from our perspective is they've now dumped 5 of the spending initiatives associated with the mining tax. 5 of them.
All right, but I'm still unclear where you're going to find the money to pay for these family benefits.
Well, you'll find out when the next election is held. There may well be a scheduled budget between now and the next election.
That adds to your burden, though, doesn't it, in terms of finding money for all the things you're promising?
You'll see our numbers.
Do we really have to wait until?
Yeah, you really do,
David,
because you know what?
But I think voters want to see what your plans are before then.
Last year, I sat here and you were saying, "Isn't it great that they're only delivering a $22 billion deficit
I'm
this
not sure
year?"
if I said that
it
was
turned
great.
out to be $44 billion. They forecast that they were going to have 4% growth. They had 3% growth. This is the thing. What Labor promises, they do not deliver. So we don't know what we're going to start the next election campaign with. All we know is whatever Labor promises, they do not deliver.
Now, let me go to the spending cuts in tonight's budget. They target defence, public service, the foreign aid budget, a raft of other areas. Are there any that you're concerned about?
We'll need to go through the details.
That nothing's jumping out that you say...
I'm not going to speculate. We'll need to go through the details.
They're pretty heavy cuts in the public service. Is there room for more cuts in the public service?
Well, there's 20,000 more public servants today than what Labor inherited in 2007.
So you think there is more room?
Well, there has to be more room. Has to be.
So that'll be one area you're looking at?
We'll look at it.
All right. And can you tell me about the defence cuts? Are you inclined to raise a concern?
Well, we can't do anything about the defence cuts because they're part of the appropriation, so we can't stop those cuts.
But you could restore the money.
Well, all they're doing is delaying part of the expenditure, particularly in relation to Joint Strike Fighter.
And foreign aid?
Well, the government's made a decision when we can't overturn that.
So, but you're not going to criticise it? You're not going to raise any concerns about it?
Well, it's just they've broken the promise. Why is it our issue? They've broken their promise.
But are you comfortable about that?
No, what, a government breaking a promise?
No, about $2.9 billion
I'm used to it.
not
I'm
being
used to the
spent on
government
foreign
breaking
aid.
promises.
Does that concern you?
Well, you have to have these cuts. And if the government was running surpluses, you wouldn't need to have foreign aid cuts.
Has the government stolen some of your thunder in some of these cuts?
No.
These weren't things that you'd penciled in?
Well, we'll see.
Sounds like they may have been.
Don't get out of crystal ball. Just let's deal with the budget that was just delivered.
Well, we look forward to hearing more about the opposition's plans on these. But Joe Hockey, thanks for joining us.